Welcome to another episode of The Green Rush. Every Friday, we come together to bring you the best stories in cannabis and some of the greatest guests. I'm David Rabinovitz, the co-host with the senior host.
That would be me, Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Thank you so much for allowing me to have a senior role here, David.
You're very welcome, Jimmy.
And this is a good opportunity, I think, to actually punch you up a little bit, push you up a little bit, build you up a little bit. You're going to be a featured speaker at the New England Cannabis Convention in New Jersey in Atlantic City next week. Isn't that right?
Next weekend, yes. I'm going to be doing what is becoming the speech I'm known for, the political and business history of cannabis in the United States. And I'm looking forward to it.
And you should be looking forward to it. And if anybody is in that Atlantic City area or is driving down either up from Washington, near Philadelphia, New York, Boston, wherever, I can recommend that David's ability to give you little tidbits that you never knew, things that you never heard of before. This is one of the things that I really enjoy listening to him pontificate about the business and political history of cannabis in this country. So I'm giving you a big plug, David. I hope a lot of people show up for this presentation, and I'm looking forward to seeing you do it.
Well, I appreciate that, Jimmy. And then I'm going to be doing the same presentation up in New Hampshire on October 7th for the New Hampshire Cannabis Association.
Fantastic. And the best part is, I know you've practiced it over and over and over again. You could probably do it in your sleep, right?
Yeah, we're getting there, but close to
it. All right, let's bring Morgan Fox on from the NCIA, our friendly communication director from the NCIA. And Morgan, you guys are at it again. Our lead story on Weed Talk News is the amendment of the Safe Banking Act and the defense budget for 2022. How did that come about?
Well, considering that there's tremendous amount of support for the Safe Banking Act in the House, but there is a little bit less, although there's still significant bipartisan support in the Senate. Senate leadership is a little bit reticent to move safe banking or other incremental reforms before their comprehensive package is introduced. Members of the House who have been championing this issue for years have been trying to put it on to any must-pass legislation that they can in order to get this done, because it's absolutely vital for small businesses that don't have access to capital and don't have access to banks, unlike the major MSOs and other well-funded companies, to be able to get access to these financial services and make banks more comfortable working with them, because speed to market is so important. And every day that goes by where there is a lack of access to banking means that small businesses are falling farther and farther behind. So our champions in the House, particularly Representative Perlmutter, have been trying to attach this to anything they can, and it passes every single time. This is now the fifth time that the Safe Banking Act has passed in some form or another on one bill or another, or standalone in the last 2 years. So, I think that it's pretty clear that this is the mandate of the People's Chamber.
And now, of course, the question is this the way politics gets done when you can't get it done in a partisan split like there is in the Senate? In other words, if the Senate Republicans who continue to block any cannabis reform so far, is this a way for them to say, okay, it's part of the defense budget, we need to get the defense budget in? Or do they look at it as, oh, those sneaky Democrats are amending this, trying to get this passed, this little cannabis reform bill passed? It's really about public safety, not about cannabis reform, right?
Well, it's absolutely about public safety, and it's also about fairness and economic development. It remains to be seen whether Senate Republicans will try to attack this the way that they did the inclusion of safe banking language in the HEROES Act last year. I tend to think not. But at the same time, there's also some opposition for its inclusion among Democratic leadership who, in my opinion, mistakenly think that passing banking reform for cannabis will slow down momentum for comprehensive reform. And as we've talked about before, I just don't think that that's the case. I think it's the exact opposite, that it will actually increase reform or increase momentum and make it easier for people that are on the fence to vote for more comprehensive bills. But it remains to be seen exactly how that's going to play out.
Yep.
When you take something away that's a burden, it frees whoever had that burden up to do other things. And right now, banking is a big burden in the cannabis industry. Take that off people's plate, maybe they can focus on other issues, which is economic development, right? Growing their businesses, as well as talking to the politicians as to why cannabis is just growing like crazy. When you look at the revenues, yeah, I'm amazed. Jimmy and I did a dry run of my presentation the other night, and when we're making some adjustments, but what I'm really surprised at, the slides I had to update from 2019 pre-COVID to today, and you look at what the projections were in 2019 as to where we'd be in 2024 versus where they are today, the industry is far exceeding anybody's wildest expectations.
Well, this industry is becoming a major economic driver and a major employer. The last jobs report showed that there were more than 300,000 people employed in the cannabis industry. And given the purported support for small businesses on both sides of the aisle, and the fact that lack of access to banking really impacts smaller businesses and social equity operators much more so than big businesses or MSOs, this should be a no-brainer. It's a real easy thing for Congress to get accomplished, considering that it's got bipartisan support, and there are just so many co-sponsors on this that it should be pretty easy to move through if leadership will allow it to happen. And I'm hopeful that once the new and updated and official version of the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act is introduced in the Senate, then some of the more incremental measures like the Safe Banking Act will actually be able to start getting hearings. But I think that's something that we're just going to have to wait and see on. And we are expecting, or at least hoping for, official introduction of that, incorporating all of the feedback that Senate leadership got from NCIA, as well as our advocacy allies in the space, as well as individuals throughout the cannabis industry and throughout the country, to make the bill that they introduced much better than what the draft was, which was still pretty good considering. But there were some major issues that I think that the drafters kind of overlooked because of lack of familiarity with the nuances that are at play with the cannabis industry. But either way, we're still pushing on.
Right. I mean, Michael Correa, when he comes on, he's always talked about low-hanging fruit and getting safe banking across the line once and for all. I was kind of surprised when I read the story that it was added to an amendment to a regular defense budget bill. Is that business as usual in politics, that if you can't get the thing going through the front door, you try and do it through the back door or a side door as an amendment?
I mean, that does seem to be the case, considering all the riders that get attached to all of the big bills that have to go through Congress. But, in this particular case, it's a very calculated strategic move because this is must-pass legislation. And it actually, I think it's entirely appropriate, just like it was appropriate to attach it to the HEROES Act because it had a direct relationship to economic recovery and public safety and public health. It's equally important to attach it to the NDAA because the Safe Banking Act would address a lot of issues with transparency and would also help to minimize the unregulated market and help unregulated actors come into the regulated market, and would help minimize some of the impacts of transnational drug trafficking organizations on both the U.S. and the global cannabis market.
Part of the safe banking, though, has nothing to do with our veterans. So the veterans who continue to get pushed aside by the VA when they come to seek help for PTSD, and knowing some of the track record of cannabis as far as treatment goes, there's no way to add access for cannabis for veterans on top of the amendment to safe banking, since that seems to be a strategy, right? I mean, I'm just waving the flag for our friends, the veterans, who I think continue to get screwed in this process, to be honest with you.
Well, there are actually a number of provisions related to veteran access that are included in various appropriations plans that both chambers of Congress are currently considering.
Right. But it's not part of this. This is safe banking. What was passed, I think it was 321-101 in the House, and now attached to this defense budget that has to get passed by the Senate. It's almost like you're force feeding this to the senators. Am I right?
Well, I'm going to claim a little bit of ignorance. There very well may be amendments or language in the larger NDAA package that relate to cannabis access to veterans.
Okay.
But it's such a huge bill, and I think that it may have escaped my individual notice, but that doesn't mean that it's not there.
Yeah, I know. Of all to me, again, I try to simplify this. It just boggles my mind that it's taken this long for something that I think is as simple as banking for a $24 billion industry. Call me crazy. If I'm a banker, I'm thinking I'd like to have access to some of that market some way, in some capacity. And the fact that there are still Republicans out there that are resisting it because it comes from the other side of the aisle bothers me beyond another story for another day.
First of all, there's bipartisan support for the Safe
Good.
Banking Act.
You know that. Yeah.
And second of all, I think that that sort of exact argument should appeal to regulators and policymakers as well.
Right.
The lack of transparency, while most cannabis businesses are on the up and up, it makes it much easier to confirm that with law enforcement as well as financial authorities and regulators if they have universal access to banking. And not to mention the fact that this very much is a public safety issue. The businesses that are still operating on a cash only basis are at real risk, and that should be a major concern for law enforcement. It should be a major concern for policymakers, and even beyond that, it's a simple issue of fairness. But this is nothing that we haven't covered before.
Right? Can you enlighten me about politics and how politics is done in DC? You've got a bipartisan bill that was supported by House Republicans, correct? Right? It passed. There are actually Republicans in the House of Representatives who voted for safe banking. That's a fact, right?
We actually had majority Republican support of those voted. So
aren't those people, don't they talk to the senators in the same party, in the same state? They know who they are. Do they ever talk to each other? Do they actually, I would like to know what's holding it up besides the fact that your side said this and your side said that, so I don't want to have anything to do with it. And go ahead.
When it comes to banking, it really comes down to a misconception that a lot of people in the Democratic leadership unfortunately hold, that access to safe banking is just going to be a free-for-all for big companies, and that it will slow momentum down for comprehensive reform, which we absolutely need. And,
right.
Is something that NCIA is also working on in consort with working on incremental reforms. But the bottom line is that big companies already have banking. They already have access to capital. Small businesses, and particularly social equity operators, do not. And speed to market is absolutely important. If we continue on the status quo while we continue to debate the best way to deschedule cannabis and regulate it at the federal level, that is going to mean months, if not years, where smaller businesses and minority-owned businesses are going to be falling farther and farther behind because they don't have access to banking and other financial services.
Right.
And also, historically, cannabis policy reform has been very incremental. And every time you pass a bill that is sort of finite and limited, it makes people that are on the fence about broader legislation that much more comfortable putting their name and support behind something that is going to have a bigger impact. And we've seen this in state after state after state, to a limited amount. We've seen this in the federal government as well, when it comes to support for things like appropriations amendments that would protect state legal, medical, and adult use programs. So, I think it's just a slight miscalculation on the part of certain members of Democratic leadership, and we're actively working to try to convince them otherwise.
Well, we know you're working hard, and we also know that you went through a little traumatic experience in the office there. You want to share that with us? Because there's nothing more scary than fire, right?
True, especially when you're not the one that started it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just a little backstory. The restaurant that was adjoining NCIA's DC office was completely gutted by a fire, and the fire department destroyed our office last week in order to put that fire out. So, we're working out of pocket, but that has not stopped our government relations team for even 1 second. And at this moment, we're gearing up for a House Judiciary hearing next week to look at the MORE Act in the House. And I believe it's a markup as well. So, things are definitely still rolling, and our team is still 100% on the ball.
So the MORE Act may make a second appearance?
Absolutely. I mean, it was always going to come up again, and because the CAOA hasn't even been introduced in the Senate yet, it's definitely not been introduced in the House.
Right.
And I think that we're probably going to get to a position somewhere down the road where we have to square those up in a conference committee. But at the very least, the fact that the House, or at least House committees, are holding markups on comprehensive cannabis policy reform is I think indicative of what I was saying before, where they've passed the Safe Banking Act 5 times now, and now they're ready to start digging back into the MORE Act, even though they already passed that. Now they're going to start looking at the details of that again and moving it along in the current session, and hopefully that will put a little bit of a fire under the Senate, as well as bring in a lot of people that might have been on the fence on the last vote because of various partisan issues, to look at this bill as something that the American people clearly want, and that could create huge benefit in terms of criminal justice reform and economic development.
Great. Hey, one last thing. The second part of our show is we're going to be looking at the tourism industry and how they are uniquely positioned to take advantage of this pro-cannabis movement. There's quite a bit of movement in various inns, bed and breakfasts, hotel chains. They're looking to embrace the acceptance of cannabis in our world. What's the official industry feeling about cannabis tourism?
Well, it's interesting because the cannabis tourism was sort of a novelty when there were only a handful of states that actually had regulated cannabis markets. Right. And now that we've expanded significantly to that, surprisingly, the tourism industry related directly to cannabis has not really shrunk at all, and in fact has expanded. And I think that's largely because both people from outside of the United States who are traveling within the country are interested in taking part, and they now have a lot more options. They don't just have to go to Colorado and Washington anymore. Right. But also, cannabis consumers within the United States who want to travel to different states are making decisions about their travel based on accessibility to cannabis, and also wanting to look at what more established cannabis systems look like before they bring that information back to their home states. So, it's not really unexpected to see this particular niche of the industry continuing to blossom.
Right. And it's a great opportunity for the tourism industry to bounce back, because they too took it on the chin during the pandemic. And this is a great opportunity to right those wrongs and come out from under, so to speak.
Exactly. When you offer a service and access that is not necessarily available in every state, but you really lean into it, there are a lot of cannabis consumers out there, or at least people that are curious about what the industry or what the environment looks like around cannabis. And, it's definitely something that people in regulated states should be taking advantage of. And, it's something that tourists are thinking about when they're planning trips.
Absolutely. Now, Morgan, you usually make an appearance the third Friday of most months. I understand there's a blessed event that you and your wife are about to enjoy over the next few weeks. I wish you good luck with that. And needless to say, if and when this blessed event happens, you are excused from your appearance next month. Okay. You're going to have your hands full, right?
I'm going to carve out time. Still got me.
Sounds like a guy who knows what it's like to have a newborn in the house.
All right. Well, Morgan Fox, good luck. Congratulations. Stay out of that restaurant. Good luck with the rebuild of the office in Washington, D.C. And we will look forward to talking with you again next month.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual, not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.